So hi, my name is Federico, and welcome to Cuttle's weekly live stream. I prepared something for last week, but it failed a little bit. But this is I'm going to try it again. So I want to make these sort of hanging panel sign, and this is directly inspired by Audrey's sardine family template project, which I really liked because the way it works is you can type any name here, and it generates a new sardine, and it adds it to the list. And so I think this is a very effective design because, I don't know, the packed sardines really convey something really cool. And the way it works, it uses both text and a shape. And I really like that because it kind of uses like Cuttle's kind of capabilities really well. So I thought, inspired by this, I wanted to show you kind of like the mechanics on how to make it work. Because this uses the text, and it uses a shape that kind of overlaps, and it uses like Weld and Score really well to create the effect. I think it's particularly nice on the sardines because you get the overlap of the tails, which is kind of cool, and then you get the sardines being packed. Audrey made another one that is kind of uses a similar technique, and it's also really effective. This holiday lights. This one has like it adds a new holiday light every time, and then additionally, this one adds like a little detail that you can add to create this kind of three-dimensional effect, or kind of like the plug for the light, which is kind of cool. So the thing I want to get to today, this is sort of like the demo that I have here, is something like this that basically uses the same technique, but it creates like a hanging sign. So every time you add another line here, then it adds a sign with the text. So that's what I want to get to. I think I was trying to think of a shape that would also be effective with that technique, or like new text, new shape. And I was like looking at these farm stand signs, kind of like these. I was thinking that makes some sense, like something like that. So it would be kind of inspired by that. So that's the idea. So let me get started with that. So I'm gonna come over here. I have a new project, so I'm gonna start from scratch, and I'm gonna call it the hanging sign. Let's change the title here. So the starting point for this one is gonna be just a rectangle. I'm just gonna keep it simple. So I'm gonna grab a rectangle from the left. I'm gonna make it 1 by 3 inches. Sorry, 3 by 1, I guess. And this is gonna be like the base of my design. Make this a little bigger. And then I want, to make it a little neat, I'm gonna add some rounded corners. Maybe something like 0.1 inches. And then for the text, I want to use that fit text. So I'm going to search for fit. There is this fit within. And if I make this text 3 by 1, it would work, I think. But I want to make it just a little bit smaller, so it creates a sort of frame, or sort of like margin. So I'm just gonna change the scale kind of by eye to 2.75 and something like 0.7. What I did here before. 0.6 is fine. So that just kind of always frames the text within that rectangle. Let's start with some example like grapes. I think the font that looks kind of interesting here, one I found, is called Boogaloo. I think it has a sort of casual look. And then for this font in particular, I always want it to be uppercase. I think it just looks more farm standy. And then I'm going to go here to show more options. And then there's an option that says capitalize, and I'm going to say uppercase. So that basically forces whatever you type there to be uppercase all the time. I think that makes it like kind of more blocky for a sign. So I'm quickly going to explain something to show you why it's important to do it a certain way. So let me make this red, because I want that to be a cut and this to be maybe a score. Let's make it blue right away. All right, so I want to explain the difference between having a project parameter and a component parameter. I'm going to rename this to be the sign. All right, so here's the difference. I'm gonna make a project parameter first. So let's say I have a project parameter called the name, which is whatever text goes in here. So I'm gonna call this a text type, and let's say I write grapes. And so this is a project-wide parameter which is gonna apply to anything that I make. So in order to sort of plug these two in, so I want to replace this text into this text, which is the one that currently says grapes. So in order to do that, I need to come here, click on the three dots, and then edit the expression. So I can type name, and so that kind of plugs in this grapes name into there. If I change it here, oranges, it's going to do the same. So if I create another component and I drag kind of instances of this sign, instances being kind of like clones or copies of it, every time I change the project-wide parameter, like here, notice that it applies to all of them. So that's one way to do it. But like the behavior that I want is that each one of these has a separate name or a separate text applied to it. So in order to do that, I actually need to make it a component parameter. So it only applies to instances of the component. So let me backtrack here. I'm going to delete this one because I don't want it right now. I'm going to revert this one to the default value, which is text. Let's make it grapes. So let's say I'm kind of starting from scratch. Let me delete this one. Okay. So I'm going to go to the text here. I'm going to click the three dots, and then there are two options: project parameter, which is the one I just showed you, and then there is component parameter. So I'm going to do that. Component parameter, and that can be text. Yeah. So that means I see this component parameter here called the text, and then if I create, another component, then it kind of disappears, which means it belongs to that component, to the sign component. So every time I grab a sign component, you'll see that this little text appears. And then if I grab another one and I select it, I see it right there. But now I get to apply different ones. So oranges. And I can apply another one, and it says cherries. Anyway, so that's like a sort of long way of kind of explaining the difference between a project-wide parameter and a component parameter. And so component parameters are really kind of useful for this kind of thing where we create variations of a component. So this is getting places. So my goal here is to have it generate like multiple copies. So the first thing I want to do is to grab this sign again. And I think the trick here is to use this like modifier called the linear repeat, which is up here. And so that one creates a repetition of each one of those. And I'm going to grab this handle to create those multiple signs. But now I want different text applied to each one of these. And so here's where we need to do a little trickery. So now let's create a new parameter here that is the project parameter, where I create the text list. Or what should I call it? The names. let's call it just the names. And so I want to make this one type text. And so my goal is that I type a list of names separated by new lines. So let's say it's grapes, enter oranges, enter cherries, apples. And so I want each one of these to be inserted into each one of these kind of copies of the sign. And so a couple of steps. The first step is I want to separate these names into a list that the program understands. So I'm going to create a new parameter just to explain, and I'm going to call that one the split text. So here we can kind of look at it carefully. So if I were to type enter the names here, this refers to these names. You can see the form that it takes. It's essentially a string of characters. So I get grapes, oranges, cherries, and each one of those is separated by this character that is like the \n, which is a character that is called a new line, which is kind of like when you press enter, you create a new line every time. So I want to turn these into a list in such a way that the new line is the separator. So the expression for that is to tell it, take the names and then split it. And the thing that you want to use as a separator is specifically that new line. So I'm going to type it like this. So as you can see, this expression separates whatever I type here into a list with kind of like you can call it a sort of number list. So each one of them gets assigned an index. So the first one is the 0, then 1, 2, and 3. And if I add any others, then it gets assigned a number, and then that's the string of text. So that's the split part. And so the way in which I can now use these kind of list is that I can grab any of these specific pieces of text if I reference it by the index number. So just before I do the linear repeat, let me show you how that looks like. So if I go and grab a sign here, I can, here in the text, I can say, edit the expression, and I can enter something like this. I want to enter the split text, so I'm going to type it specifically. So I'm going to type it here. I'm going to say it's split text. So notice if I just do split text, it is going to enter all the items of the list, which is overkill. But then I can kind of reference it specifically by the index. So if I type 0, then I get grapes. If I type 1, I get oranges. If I type 2, I get cherries. So that's really useful because I can grab any one of them. And so now I can apply it to the linear repeat situation. So linear repeat, let's go back to the linear repeat. I can go linear repeat. I can move that handle so it goes kind of vertical. I can say I want to, let's kind of overlap it slightly. So then with linear repeat, you get this option to customize each version of the repeated element. And to do that, we need to check here where it says customize each repetition. And so what that does is that it creates, again, a sort of index number. And so each repetition gets assigned a number. So this one is the 0, this one is the 1, this one is the 2, and so on and so forth. And if I create even more repetitions, it gets assigned even more numbers. So like if I increase the number of repetitions, you can see how the numbers here start getting bigger. So what I can do now, and that particular number that gets assigned this name, this variable is called rep for repetition. And so what I can do here is go to sign, and instead of 0 or 1 or 2, I can actually type rep. And so what it does is that it takes, each repetition has the 0, 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And so it replaces the 0 here, then the 1 here, then the 2 here, then the 4 here, and so on, the 3. And so that's how I get the names to be kind of typed like so. As you can see, I'm missing the figs, but yeah, let's fix that right now. So one thing I can do with the linear repeat is that it has a number of repetitions. So I need to adjust it based on the number of names that I'm typing. So if I type another name, then I would have to come here and say like, oh, now it's 6 repetitions. But like we can sort of automate that number. There is a way of finding out how many items there are on a list. So I'm going to create another parameter here, and I'm going to call it the count. And so I want to say, hey, tell me from what's the count for split text. And I guess it's not the count, it's the length. But so what this count is telling me is like, it's literally just counting how many items are on the list. So if I have fewer items, you'll see that it has 4 or 3. And so then what I can do is like, I can plug that count into the number of repetitions for the linear repeat. So I only need to type count here. So now it only creates the adequate number of repetitions based on counting how many pieces of text I wrote. So I can have the apples, and figs, and tomatoes. So that's the sequence of events. I create the list. I kind of split it using the new lines, and then I get the count, and then I can plug that into the linear repeat. And now the only thing left to do is really apply the modifier. So if to this kind of repeated set of signs, I go to modify and apply the Weld and Score, which is here at the bottom. It creates that overlap, and so it's kind of neat because like with the overlap, each new sign that gets created is kind of like on top of the previous one, and so so you can see that it welds everything. It's going to cut it as a single piece, and then where the line used to be here, where the overlap is, it just also makes it into a blue score line. But we can do better. We can create this kind of little sign element. If I change this linear repeater a little bit, like I can get it to overlap more if I want to, or less. But let's open it up so it's kind of separated. I don't know, 1¼ inches. Sorry, 1/8. And so now that they're separated, I need to create like a sort of connector piece. So I'm going to go back to my sign component. And then for the connector piece, I just want like a little suggestion, like an illustrated suggestion of like a chain or something. So I was thinking I could use the pill shape. So something like this. I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to change let me close this for a moment. I'm going to make the dimensions how big do I make this? 0.4, like ½ inch-ish, and 0.125, like ½ inch by an 8. And so I'm going to place it like over here. So that'd be kind of like my suggested chain. And I want it to be I want it to be like a little bit offset, because if I look at it now that is repeated, like I want it, like, see, it doesn't quite sell the effect of being kind of like a connect, like a link. So I wanted to move it up a tiny bit. So something like that. So kind of like the center of the pill kind of lands somewhere in the middle. Yeah, cool. So I kind of get that the connection and the score kind of like for free. All right, so I think that looks good. So I want to just mirror it over to the other side. So I'm going to go back to my grapes sign over here. I don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it. It's red. I'm going to apply the mirror repeat. So that changes it to the other side. And if I inspect it, there it is. So yeah, cool. Let's make sure things are working. So I get the grapes, oranges, cherries, apples. And so yeah, the cool thing about these is that if I cut it, this is what I get. So notice that it cuts as a single piece. So it's all joined. But then with the scores, I get the sort of detail of the chain right here. So I think that works. Let's go back to the project over here. So I think the next thing I would like to figure out is, this works really well if you're only cutting and scoring, because I just kind of like blanket applied the Weld and Score to this shape that I was generating. But sometimes you want like an engraved detail, or sometimes you might want to cut the text separately and glue it on. And so like, for example, with the sardine family, the text here is engraved, the eye of the sardine is engraved, but then you still get the Weld and Score kind of like delineating the shapes. Similarly here in the holiday lights, the name is engraved, which is probably like a nicer look sometimes. So I wanted to show you also how to do that, because it's a little different perhaps. So let's go back to my hanging sign. So what I need to do is separate both elements. The sign itself and then the engraved text. But like we have all the parameters here, so we can like do that relatively quick. So let me separate the sign first. So I can come over here on the sign. I guess I'm going to change the name. So what I mean is that I want this sign without the text. So I'm going to hide the text here for a moment. And then I can grab this element, which is just the rectangle and the pills. I'm going to group it. And now I can right click on it. And then it says, there's an option that says extract as a component. So I can like extract it. And it shows up over here. So that shouldn't change the structure of my thing too much, except I can now use the sign element on its own. So I guess I'm going to name it sign no text. And then this is the sign with text. And on the sign with text, let me just bring the text back. Okay. So the first one, did I break it up? Oh, I kind of broke it a little bit. I'll fix it. But let's move on with the idea. So this is the Weld and Score one. Why did I do? Oh, it's because maybe I want these. Yeah, I just need to change the order. Because it was welding and scoring, so because this rectangle was below, then it got welded. Anyway, it was changing order. Okay, let's go back to what I was trying to do. So I want it to be engraved. So now I need to sort of separate the elements. I need to have the sign alone over here. And so with this one, I know that I simply need to apply a linear repeat. And I'm just going to apply the same distance that I had before, which is 1.125. And as long as I keep track of that distance, I'm good. And then this one gets the Weld and Score simply to create kind of like juice this piece, kind of like separately, with no text added to it yet. And I need to make the linear repeat have the number of repetitions that we already created, which is the one that has the count. So let's add the count to that. All right, so now that every time I type something new, it creates a new sign. Sweet. And now I can use the text also separately. I could create it from scratch, or I can extract it as a component. Why not? So that would be the text alone. I'm just reordering it here so I can understand what's happening. All right, cool. So now with the text alone, I can be like, hey, here's the text alone. I want that to have a fill now because I want it to be engraved. I want that to also have a linear repeat. So let's see. Let's apply the linear repeat. And this particular linear repeat also has the same, well, let's place it like so. It should have the same distance, which I applied to the other one, 1 to 5. It should have the same number of repetitions. So that would be count. And it should do, let me make it black so it's an engrave. And maybe I need to get rid of the score by applying no stroke. There you go. And I want that, I want to do the trick where like the linear repeat applies to each name individually. So I need to customize each repetition. And then on the text alone, I need to enter that expression that I used before, which is take the split text and then use the index with the rep variable. Okay. A little untangling of things, but hopefully that makes sense. So the idea is that I basically separated the text element and the sign element into two. This could have been components as well, but like, and as long as I kept the distance the same, then I can sort of align it. So I had a question. Wouldn't you want them individually so you could add or remove according to sales, holes, or slots for chains? I'm not sure I understand the question because like, well, if you wanted to add them individually, then you'd have to like glue them separately or something. You could do that. I think that would be like a different style of thing. Like I was kind of like relying on the Weld and Score in this case. All right, cool. So I think this is just like the basic building elements to create things like these. I think there's a lot of things that you can sort of innovate into like the way the shapes get overlapped, but hopefully with these elements you can like, you know, take it where you want to take it. One last thing I wanted to mention, which I probably will be doing a longer live stream on this, is that now you can, you know, before we could simply add emoji here. If we search for emoji, we could add some grape emoji, something like that. So it could be added to the text right here. But there is a new element that can be added. So for example, and it gets added just exactly like emoji. If I search for Noun Project, now there is like a big, really big library of icons and elements. So let's say I want the oranges. There is a ton of oranges to choose from over here. And each one of these can be simply inserted like like the text. So now I get that. I don't know if that one is the good one for these, but so anyway, that's like a really fun, really cool thing that got added recently to Cuttle. You might have seen me use the Noun Project before separately, but now it's just available from the picker. Let's add the cherry here. So I think I want to do a longer project with these. So you can add those wherever there is text. All right, cool. Thanks a lot for coming and watching the live stream. I'll be posting this template as an example that you can use. And all right, I will see you in the next one. And thanks, Audrey, for all the inspiration. All right, bye.